Hey everyone, Steve Martinelli here from Equinix, live at KubeCon Paris. And with me right now is Mark Sturdevant. Mark, tell everyone your name, I already did that one. Tell people where you work at, what do you do, give yourself a little intro.
All right, so Mark Sturdevant, I work at IBM Research, specifically in OpenTech. I'm a coder. I enjoy working in code, but also I've been focused on open source for about 10 years now. So most of what I do is around sharing code and building communities and developer advocacy that goes with that.
Okay. So specifically, what do you do at IBM? I know you kind of said a little bit there, but can you go a little bit deeper on that one? Like, what's your day-to-day kind of look like?
Day-to-day. So my group, the larger group, we focus a lot on some large, important communities that do open source. But we also help out some smaller projects. In particular, in IBM, sometimes we're inner-sourcing and moving to open source with projects.
Okay.
So a lot of times our role there is to help people within IBM do it right.
Okay. That's interesting. So is that what inner source is? It's kind of like teaching open source best practices to product teams?
Yeah, to me, inner source is taking all of the things that work well in open source and doing it within a company. It might be code that's never going to go public.
I got
you. Want those practices. You want the best practices of sharing. And in IBM's case, a lot of times, it's not just one team on one thing that's doing inner source. It's more interesting when it's people around the company all coming together and contributing something. So it's very much like the open source model.
Well, it is a pretty giant company, so you would have other little small teams who maybe want to contribute to a specific project internally.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And most of the time when I'm involved, it is something that intends to go open source, whether it's the whole thing or just part of it. They're hoping to move out to something that will work across companies at some point.
That's awesome. So I guess you say you've been working in open source now for about 10 years, and that's where you kind of come in as the subject matter expert internally, so you can help guide these teams with open source best practices on their inner source projects. So tell me about how you got started in open source and what makes you an expert?
So how I got started, it's interesting. I'm thinking now, when I was first asked to work on open source after working on products for years, I think I hesitated. I think I almost said no thanks. And then they came back to you and said, Mark, this is your job. You're going to do it. So I talked myself out of this great opportunity, but they made me do it anyway. Because I was a little reluctant. It's like, well, we're not going to make money. How is this going to make sense? Who's going to sponsor me?
Gotcha.
But it turned out to be a great opportunity. I was working with OpenStack, and it was just a large, growing, thriving community. And being part of that community really just, I haven't left open source since.
And that's when you were at HP.
And I was at Hewlett Packard then, yes.
Yes. And you were working on, I want to say it was Manila and Cinder.
Yeah, Manila and Cinder. Cinder first, and then I was in Manila core working on shared file systems. And I went to IBM to work on shared file systems for OpenStack there as well.
So you're a bit of a storage guy before now.
I was the storage guy, but before I was the storage guy, I was the database guy, and I was the HR systems guy, the IT guy. So it's been a few things. And then a specialist.
And then you became the infrastructure guy, and then now you're the AI guy, I want to say.
And now it's mostly AI. Yeah, I just do some security. I do some security as well. The only thing I don't do is networking, so I assume it's next.
So how long have you been a software developer now?
30 years.
30 years. So what's the best advice you can give to someone who wants to stay, hands-on for 30 years? Maybe it's what you were just kind of talking about. Just be open to opportunities.
To be in software for 30 years or be in open source. So I think just enjoy what you do. I think for me, like being able to write code and do this for a living for 30 years, it's fun. Not everything at work is fun all the time. It's work. But if you enjoy writing code, write code.
Yeah. If
you want to get away from code and do the soft skills thing, I really appreciate, I call it soft skills. People that are good at all those other things, they're worth a lot in our industry because some of us just let us do the code. But then with open source, it's really more about taking all that, and now you have to have a community mindset. have those interactions and that sharing.
That's actually funny that you say that, because within open source, some of those soft skills are very important also.
Very important. It wouldn't work
You know,
without
you
it.
have to learn how to play nice with others. You can't make, unilateral decisions. A lot of open source projects are, you have to propose a blueprint or propose a feature, and you have to get buy-in from other people in the community.
And there are a lot of people doing, helping the community run that don't even touch the code.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
they hold everything together in a lot of ways, right?
So you talked about open sourcing some projects. Can you tell me about some of the ones that you've open sourced?
Sure. So things that I worked on at IBM, where it started at IBM and it went open source. There are a couple of them, and they're out there now. One was for security, secure supply chain. I worked on a license scanner, and what we did is we developed it because we needed it, but we also contributed to be part of the Cyclone DX project under OWASP. So I'm still maintaining that.
Okay.
And along with a coworker who's very involved in the developing of the S-bombs and the various bomb specs in Cyclone DX. I've also worked on a project where it was more inner source graduating to open source.
Okay.
We call it KKID, where we serve AI models, and it gives us a good way to to serve them and run inference and have that API working for us.
I do want to talk to you a little bit more about open source, about AI and open source. But before we get there, what are some of the things that you've seen, common pitfalls from people who are when you're going through that inner source to open source transition? What are some of the common pitfalls that you've seen? It's like around licensing, around...
Sure. Well, I think it starts with licensing. It seems like an easy checkbox. I mean, get a README, have a README, have a get ignore, have a license. But I think the first pitfalls are, it's sometimes surprising to some of us, not everyone's using Git. Not everyone's familiar with pull requests as a requirement.
Yes.
So, Git is something, if you happen to be on other projects that don't use it, you have to learn it. But the idea that you don't merge without doing pull requests, that you get reviews, a lot of that seems like, step one.
Yeah.
But there are teams that didn't work that way, need to learn to work that way and start thinking like it's a community. I need to have reviewers. I need to have consensus. I need to work together.
Yeah. It's funny because, when you're in that setting, it just seems so obvious.
Yeah.
But there's, hundreds of thousands of software developers out there who are not involved in open source or don't have experience in it.
So we're still, I know a lot of us, we're surprised when someone doesn't know Git, and you don't want to be, it's like, oh, you don't know Git? No, not everyone is working on that.
Yeah.
People are working in different places on different things. So everyone's got to learn. If they haven't done it yet, they have to learn it. But yeah, those are the practices. I mean, build a community, have some documentation, understand the contributing flow.
The importance of a good commit message. I learned that one the hard way.
You say so. Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
So you mentioned working a lot on AI these days and open source. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I mean, obviously the thing that's taken off like crazy in this last year, and it seems like more than a year, when all the generative AI and the large language models and things along that nature. So I work around a lot of people in research and open source that obviously we were focusing on that a lot. I spent a lot of time looking at Hugging Face, and all of a sudden, I didn't know what it was, and all of a sudden everybody knows what it is. But certainly, like I said, that one project I'm working on, they're serving models, and they'll do generative models and things like that. I've helped with some of that with demos that could do, object detection and things like that are fun. But also recently, like we've added embeddings to that. People wanted the RAG use case and the vectors and all those things that I didn't even know what it was a year ago.
Now, it's funny. I remember you and I worked on something where we used OpenCV to find things on images and videos. Remember that?
Yes. I remember that. It's got a lot of views.
It does. So how does the stuff that you're working on now compare to that? Is it like blow it out of the water? Is it a whole new way of thinking? Is it?
Well, it's interesting because I think of some of that, and it's a little bit hard to understand what changed. But what changed is, a few years back, deep learning started to allow us to do those things with images and object detection and things like that. But you know what? It was no good at language. Language was still done a different way.
Yes.
And then when they got to these huge models, they figured out at a certain size and transformer architecture, things like that. Now they can start doing things where you can generate language, you can understand it and generate it, and all of a sudden it's a game changer as well. So I think some of those things, remember, DALL-E could draw a picture for you.
Yeah.
Well, now you've got these large language models that can talk for you, and they can answer and they can think. So a lot of the same things we used to do, we're doing again, but we're doing it in bigger, better ways. A lot of it's language.
It sounds like the generative stuff got a lot better, but maybe the detection stuff was already pretty good and maybe also got a little bit better. Maybe I'm simplifying
I
things.
think that's the way I think of it. But yeah, I think we're probably underestimating how much better that got as well.
Exactly.
But that's not something I've been looking at. But it still makes news, so I'm sure it's doing well. But definitely the language part changed in the meantime a lot.
Interesting. So what are some of the, and I've been asking everyone these last few questions here, what are you personally most interested about being at KubeCon for? What are you interested about learning?
We talked about the open source community, and what's great about this kind of event is you get to meet people face to face, and especially you getting outside the meetings and the receptions and hanging out a little bit. A lot of us, we've learned to work together really well just in Git and in messages without really seeing each other other than a little avatar. And I think that's great that it works. But sometimes, if you hang out with someone a little bit, talk about non-work things for a while and network, when you go back and you start exchanging those messages, it's a little more
meaningful.
You're a little more connected.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So you got to get out and meet people and talk to people and network.
All right. Mark, we're almost wrapped up, but I want to know, do you have any advice for attendees being at KubeCon here? Because you're a bit of a conference vet. So any advice for folks going to their first conference, or do you want to give a shout out to see where folks can learn more about what you've been working on and what's going on at IBM Research?
Well, let me focus on the first one.
All right, sure.
So definitely, I think what I just said is when you're coming to the conference, make sure that you try to take advantage of getting out and meeting people, especially if you're in a community. Find out who you work with might also be there that you've never met. Make sure you find them, get some time with them. And beyond that, you can meet people that you didn't know you had a reason to talk to. Sometimes that all works out as well. So, get out and network and interact with people. Find people that you haven't met, track them down, spend some time with them.
Don't be, I know it's hard for software developers and all of us, but, try not to be so shy.
Yeah, sometimes we're all kind of in the same boats. We're not necessarily that social and outgoing, but get a bunch of nerds in the corner and talk about Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. It's
Hey, that movie was great.
Was it?
It really, I liked it.
I don't know about
that. Last one. Where can folks find more about what you're doing?
Well, so most of my work is open source. So there is a WASP Cyclone DX project.
Okay.
There's also the KKit repo I've been working on. You can find KKit NLP and GitHub because it's open source as well.
Mm.
But the bigger projects that we contribute to, they're out there. Kubernetes, PyTorch, Knative, things like that.
Awesome.
Definitely look for the big ones because we all depend on them.
Nice. All right, Mark. Thanks so much for your time, and
thank you.
Pleasure having you on.
I've been a big fan of your show. I'm glad to be on it.
Thanks, Mark. See you, dude.
You too.